Happy Friday, everyone. It is time for Beyond the Steps. I know that you are happy to see us here with two more guests today, and just as happy as we are to see you back with us this Friday for our weekly podcast that talks about everything dance, medicine, and science, nutrition, psychology, gender equity, racism, sex abuse and prevention. You name it, we cover it in order to help us live happy, healthier, and safer lives as performance athletes. We are super excited to bring a show to you today with two new guests. Can you believe it? After 4 seasons, we have two new guests with us from the Two Dance Moms podcast. We have Amira. I'm going to get it wrong. Azimi. Amira Azimi
You
and
got it.
Cayse
Yes.
Day. Thank you so much. And Cayse Day with us today. And we are going to talk about self-care. And not self-care like you would normally think of self-care, not necessarily facials and massages, which is what everybody thinks about all the time. But we're going to talk about what are the self-care practices that we can do at home with our performance athletes to help them get through their peak training season. And I know that can be hard with teenagers and young people because they're like, self care. Oh my gosh, what is that? But we want to talk about how important it is and what we can do to help them use self care to be able to get through these peak training times. So, without further ado, Bree, will you please introduce our guests?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this. This podcast. First of all, you got to get into it. If you haven't already, Two Dance Moms podcast. Paula is a proud partner of the podcast and supporter of the podcast. So we're going to talk about that later in the show. But Cayse Day is a fitness trainer, wife to a firefighter, and mom of three, two boys and one girl. She started off as a basketball mom and was in over her head when her youngest daughter made the competition dance team. If you know, you know, making her a dance mom. Now, 6 years later, Cayse is finding joy and lots of laughter podcasting about her experiences as a dance mom. And Amira is the proud parent of two kids, a very athletic 12-year-old son who's a soccer player, and energetic 10-year-old competitive dancer located in SoCal. She's in her 6th year as competitive dance parent and navigating the waters with helpful input from her former D1 college athlete husband who has lots to say about all things sports. Welcome to you both. We're so excited to have you on. First time guests.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
We're really excited.
Well, it's so fun. And we talk all the time how there's just so many parallels with dance and every other sport. And, Amira, I know you and I share this, like we're knee deep in being soccer moms as well. And I'm enjoying it so much, but it's always amazing. Every day I say this to my husband, that it is the same story as dance, just a different sport, right? And so it's fun kind of connecting those dots and applying, what I know from the dance world to soccer and all the other things our kids are getting into. So we're excited to chat with you both today. Welcome. Tell us about the Two Dance Moms podcast and why you decided to pursue this platform. What was it that you were like, we've got to do this together and we've got to get this out there?
It started, neither of us had danced competitively growing up. So this whole world was very new to both of us.
Yeah.
And my very first year as a dance mom, like you said, I didn't know what I was doing. I made so many mistakes, huge mistakes, showing up to the wrong place, thankfully on the right day, and I was never too far away, but lots of mistakes. And I went to one of my favorite resources to try and find information, which is podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I love audiobooks. And I was like, man, I'm really not good at this. I need to get more information. And at the time, the only resource available was really the show. And that didn't give me the tips and tricks that I was looking for. And so I had to just trial and error. And there was a lot of error, but there was also a lot of learning. And, when we make mistakes, we learn from them.
Absolutely.
And come year 2, Amira joined our studio and we became buddies. And then year 3, I'm seeing all the new dance moms and I don't have quite as many colossal mistakes. I'm still learning. Obviously, we're always learning.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing them comment about things that I had experienced and lived through and was like, oh, my heart breaks for you. I don't want you to go through the same mistakes I did. And that was the very beginning budding of it for me. What about for you?
I mean, I would say similar. Ironically, my son had like a project where he had to make a podcast a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I was just saying to him, oh, that would be so much fun. I love podcasts. It would just be so much fun to understand the process, even if nobody listened. And I
Right.
feel like it was the next day that Casey called me
It
and
was
said,
the
I have
next
this
day.
idea
Yeah.
to help other dance moms. And, we were spending an hour a day, maybe daily,
Yeah.
maybe 5 times a week, talking about dance mom things that we
Yeah.
actually talk about on the
Easy to do.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we just thought, let's just record it. Maybe no one will listen. Maybe 5 people will listen and it will help them. And the rest is history.
We are
I
both
love it.
actually
I
verbal
love it.
processors, so it works
Yeah.
well for the
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that the impetus was like, this is what you don't know, because I think growing up, like my mom, I was the only one to do anything with dance or the arts. I was the dancing and singing all the time. And she dropped me off and wanted me to do it on my own. But I think of how much further I would have gone faster if my mom would have known the basic things. I'm grateful for my journey and how I experienced that. But today it's so much more involved in terms of what's out there and the dangers of the industry, but also steps you can take to get where you want to go, and then also landmines to avoid. And we didn't have to worry about that so much growing up, but in today's dance world it's completely different. And I think having that that community where everybody is kind of sharing similar experiences and going, okay, let me help you avoid this, and what I wish I would have known. That's so important and so valuable. Like, I can't say it enough what you guys are doing. So and there was such a big gap for that. So I'm super glad that you guys filled that up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. It's much needed as a dance teacher and competition director. Having a dance mom community that's knowledgeable is very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. And I will leave that at that for right now. But we like to start with the basics here at Beyond the Steps, because we have viewers who are first time viewers, who are weekly viewers. And so I want to start with defining self care, what you all define as self-care in the context of how we're discussing it today. Because I talked a little bit about how people think of self-care, the cucumbers on the eyes and the but
Well, it can be that too. It can be that.
exactly. Not that during competition season we have any time for cucumbers on the eyes,
No.
but in the context of how we're discussing it today, how do you define self-care?
When we're talking about self-care, it's for us and it's for our kids, because it takes a toll on everybody involved in the process. And it's what we do for ourselves to make us feel full, physically, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. These are the spaces where we tend to run dry. And if our cup isn't full, how can we pour into others? How can we, as parents, pour into our children? How can our children pour into their sport?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that visual that they give you on the airplane. The oxygen mask comes down and you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can assist somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we look at it, is we need to be full in all of these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, like, the definition you gave is perfect, and I understand that as a 44-year-old woman who understands, okay, I have to pour into my own cup, and I can't help people if I haven't helped myself, and so on and so forth. But for kids who are big into instant gratification, I want it now. I don't want to wait. Meditate. What? Why do I want to meditate? I got to get here. I got to do this. Like, why do I need to eat these vegetables? I don't want to do this. Like, I'm just going to throw chips in my mouth. How do you make this concept relatable and applicable for your kids?
I feel like that's such a good question. And I feel like the answer lies in like analogies or comparisons to things that make it relatable to them. Like Casey used the example of the oxygen mask, and that helps us parents further understand. When I was growing up, my mom would always make like a reference to a car, and she would be like, you, for your car to go, you need to put gas and have water and take care of it. And she would always speak about that when referencing like proper nutrition and sleep. And I use that when my kids were younger. And I would say now with this generation, there's so much focus on their electronic devices, I have
Mhm.
10 and a 12-year-old. They now have their own phones. Everybody's got an iPad, tablets for school. So I think to break it down for them, you can really just say, hey, for your device to work, for you to be able to be on your phone and communicate with your friends, do your schoolwork, you have to charge your device. You
Mhm.
have to make sure it's up to date. You know,
Love that.
you have to protect it. And
Mhm.
feel like that's a way that it's very relatable to them, and it can make it, easier for them to understand why it's so important for them to do these important steps.
Mhm.
I
It's all
love
Absolutely.
that.
about
Yeah, yeah. And so do you think that I feel like we've come a long way. Let me preface this with that statement. But do you think it's still a common misconception that self-care is frivolous and unnecessary? Do you find a lot of dance parents are dismissive about the idea of self-care, or do you think um it's more widely accepted at this point?
It's definitely both. I mean, it is considered frivolous because it's been marketed that way in a lot of
Sure,
sense. Like you even said that visual of the cucumbers on the eyes and a face
sure,
mask, and that does have its place in it, but it has been used kind of as a marketing tool for like I'm just gonna treat myself and like I want a
sure.
frappuccino today. It's my self care, and
Mhm.
that doesn't really fill the cup very far.
Yeah.
It's really just a couple drops in the cup. It might be something that is lovely and beneficial for you, but it's not going to really get it full so that you can actually have that experience. And I think it is growing in its understanding. I mean, you see it not just in these like wellness spas. And I think that's kind of the rebrand of self care is wellness. But wellness is developing its footprint outside of a spa space. It's also
Yeah.
Mhm.
wellness retreats. People are understanding that it's more than just these physical experiences. We need to take it deeper. We need to have rest and true rest. We need to, consider ourselves on all these other levels that we have, not just that, 50-minute massage that we might want to book for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and especially mental health. I feel like the pandemic was really a catalyst for people talking about the tools to um, maintain their mental health at home. We've
Mhm.
seen a big shift in those resources and tools that people kind of do on their own and incorporate into their daily lives since the pandemic, I would say more so. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that that's the case.
We all got
Yeah.
stretched during that season and we had to learn. If you
Yeah.
hadn't done anything before, at that point, it kind of came down to it. And
Yeah,
yeah,
like if you didn't believe mental health was a thing but
Right.
after going through the pandemic, something is seriously wrong. Because I
Yeah.
think if you didn't believe it before, you definitely believed it in going through that whole mess. So,
there's
um,
as much as I think we live in a culture that is generally too hurried,
yeah,
Mhm.
it was it was unhealthy to go from the
yeah,
pace we're at and then have a full stop. And especially
Right.
yeah,
watching my children go from physically expressing themselves with their sports and getting all of that energy and what that does for you mentally and physically to be active, and then all of a sudden you just
it's
can't
just
and you're sitting on the couch at home with your phone, and what that did to at
It's
least my
horrible.
kids, I can speak to my family, and what that did, it was rough. I mean,
yeah.
Mhm.
mentally it was such a challenge, and having to work around that to try and see them continue with their mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was.
we could go on that tangent for days
Right.
and
Right.
days and days, so we won't even go there right now. But if you're just joining, I'm Bree with Paula here with my fabulous friend and co-host Melissa McDaniel Grisham, and we are chatting with Casey Day and Amira Azimi today from Two Dance Moms podcast about what are the self-care practices we can do at home with our performance athletes to help them get through their peak training season. There's a lot in this episode. We've already talked about a lot, so go back and watch from the beginning and be sure to like, share, and subscribe everywhere at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. So, can you all share some specific self-care practices or rituals that you find beneficial for the physical well-being of your young performance athletes?
It's pretty basic and we all know it. Sleep. nutrition, exercise, and how you get to kind of express those in your life. So we have tips and tricks that we like to do. It's easier to say than it is to actually practice. Limiting your screen time before bed. If you have a routine to get yourself ready, to kind of calm yourself down, and that can even come in line with those things that we may kind of say are less valuable, but they help prepare us for rest. So even like a skincare routine, which is super trendy with a lot of the dancers right now. But what it's doing, it's not so much, oh, I need my skin to look good. It's preparing us mentally for rest. We are dialing down and zoning into kind of that next stage, the sleeping stage. I also think too, not wearing exercise clothes to bed is something that mentally we like to stay in our leggings or whatever, or I'm going to wear, but it's like, what are we saying to ourselves mentally? Like, no, having that transition into actual pajamas and being like, no, these clothes are just for
valid.
Sleeping.
I'm going to wear these clothes because I'm done. I'm turning off that active part of my brain and even telling my body, we're not going to be active right now. We're going to rest.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
different-
what do you do? So like I have two very different kids, as do most people. My daughter, as soon as her head hits the pillow, I mean, her eyes are sinking and she's asleep in 5 minutes. And I'm so jealous of her every day. But then my son, it's like his mind, he's getting home later and later the older he gets. And it takes him a long time to wind down. And we try the melatonin and we try, we have a whole bedtime routine that we've done since they were babies. But the reality is he's getting home from these physically exhaustive, practices. And he's like, he's not ready to relax yet. It takes him a while to come down. Do you guys deal with that with your dancers, and how do you overcome that?
we definitely do.
Yeah. Like he wants to come home and eat like another meal and, talk. And sometimes he's got homework that he's got to do. And so, he's, just turned 11. And, by the time I look at the clock, it's like sometimes 10:30, depending on when he's getting his homework done, before he can get in bed. And then he's still not going to sleep. Right. So it takes him a lot longer. And I've talked to the doctor about it, and we've done all the things that that have been recommended. It's just, he's just that kid. And I'm sure. So what do you guys do for that?
I deal with it with my, all three of my kids. My two boys are just finishing. My oldest has finished high school just this past year, and my middle is graduating senior and would go to school leave at 7 in the morning and not come home till 9 o'clock at night because his school was far and his athletics, and it was just a very long day. And come home and it's like chaos. And it's now the same with my daughter. She's 14 years old, and so her dance classes go until 9 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And, we get home, it's 9:20-ish by the time we grabbed the dance bag and made it into the house. What we try to do as best we can is all the things that you were talking about, we try to tackle them throughout the day. So when she comes home from school, we do homework. She also doesn't have PE because of her dance schedule. So she gets to get out of school an hour early so that she can have a little more time to work on her academics, so we don't save it until the last minute at home. Though sometimes it happens. I mean, it's just a part of life. Sometimes you're doing homework late. But from there, I also pack her food. I force her, which she doesn't like, but to eat before you go to dance. We're taking our nutrition as we can. That way we're not coming home at the end of it and feeling like this is the first time I've had an opportunity to eat a solid meal. So she's eating dinner like a senior citizen at like 4 or 5 o'clock. And then packing something very nutritious for her. She usually gets a blanket dance, not every day, but often. And so like hummuses and different things with like or stuff like that, or smoothies, whatever we can do to try and like fill her up throughout that time. That way when she comes home, it's a snack rather than dinner.
A meal.
30.
Yeah.
And that helps too, because digestion, if you're having to digest your whole dinner at 9 o'clock, that's part of what keeps you up. Your body isn't ready for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. And now I have to just wrestle that with my son, because he's like, he doesn't like eating before soccer because he feels
Heavy,
And because
full,
it's a
yeah.
lot of running, and it's like he doesn't like that. He starts to feel sick, and it affects how he's playing, and so he's very like, I don't want to eat, so it's like I'm shoving like a protein drink on the way to soccer and like snacks, but he won't eat a meal. And so it's just I love asking and hearing the perspective on it, because it's a constant struggle with that one. And it's
Mhm.
amazing how kids are so different, from one to the other too. So then let's talk about the mental side of it. And the same question applies to the mental side, but then I want to add in another layer of, you know, as from a director's standpoint, I've seen so many times over the years where, especially in a stressful convention or competition environment, I mean, the kids and the parents are going at it. I
It.
mean, the
Just
kid is snapping at the mom. The mom is like drawing the line in the sand, like, you're not going to talk to me like that. As the director, I'm like, separate. We don't need the kid to be stressed before they're going on stage. But I totally empathize with the mom, because if my daughter talked to me like that, I would flip my crap
right.
too. Like I totally, so like, how do you guys deal with the mental aspect of the stress that, remembering that they're kids, this is a lot for them. It's a lot for us. It's certainly a lot for them, and they don't have the same coping skills or maturity that we do, because they haven't lived as much life, and we still can't even deal with it
Right.
properly sometimes. So what's your advice on all of that, and what do you recommend, and how do you deal with those moments when they inevitably happen?
So it's so interesting. I feel like mental well-being and practices and rituals is a newer thing discussed for young
For
athletes.
sure. For
Whereas
sure.
physical, growing up playing sports, I know rituals and practices for my physical well-being. But I asked my husband as we were preparing for the interview, and we were preparing for our prior episode we had with a mental performance coach. I was asking what he played really high level sports up to
Sure.
D1 football, and I was like, what tools did they give you guys for mental well-being? What rituals, what practices? And he said absolutely none. There was never a discussion about mental health. So this is a newer thing. So I feel like knowing that, us as parents, we have to give ourselves grace that we are not always going to navigate this the right
Sure.
way. And we see other parents maybe reacting. We have to sort of give them grace because they're figuring it out as we all are. And then I think we have to lean and rely on experts and people that really know what they're doing. And we were super blessed to have this mental performance coach, Chloe Molesky. She's on Instagram at Grow with Chloe. She gave very specific tools that I feel like, I want to share a couple of them that I feel like were really helpful, and I will gloss over them. But the biggest being approaching growth versus fixed mindsets for your athletes and having them check in on this regularly. Basically, a chart. You're going to have on the left a fixed mindset approach of things that has happened to the athlete. So they lost a game, they missed a PK, they didn't adjudicate where they wanted to, whatever it may be, that's their left fixed side. And then on the right is going to be a growth mindset approach to those things that happened on the left. And they use words like yet and every day. And so they change the statements. For example, in a dancer's world, we talked about in that episode saying something like, I'm not a turner, or I don't have my aerial, or I suck at whatever it may be, ballet. It's I'm not a turner yet. I'm working to get better at ballet every day. And so writing a statement like that and checking in regularly for your athlete is very good for them. She recently shared this tool she calls the stoplight tool, which I think is amazing. It's just a visual idea for your young athlete. Red being, you envision a stoplight, red being negative thoughts, and then green being positive self-talk. And yellow sort of being real, tangible things that are happening to kind of break up those
Sure.
negative thoughts. And so anytime you feel there's a red light, you feel yourself saying to yourself, I am not this, I suck at this did not work. You have to intentionally think of like a yellow light to turn it to like a reality, tangible, what's happening right now. And I will encourage both my kids who are athletes to sort of shift when they are going into negative red light thoughts. And I think that's really useful. So that comes from Chloe. And then things, basics as a dance mom that I use with my dancers, I feel has helped mental health in my son. And then therefore in turn, I think all those things are applicable for us as parents are just like Casey said with regarding physical well-being. I think it's just the basics, like breathing. Breathing is so important, whether it's a minute of breath and time alone, it goes a long way. And so I think we have to be cognizant at times our dancers, our athletes are getting in their heads, and we can take a step away and have a breath and a moment of reflection. I think that goes a long way. And then the other thing is, before my dancer performs, I always have her do, we call it a zone out. I don't really know what else to call it, but she puts her headphones on without music, sometimes with or without music. But she generally will just kind of zone out and take time separate of the team, separate of the routine sometimes. And I feel like it just really prepares her to take on the challenges that come as, a dancer and going on stage and giving such a big piece of herself.
Yeah.
So I think all of those things can be applied to a parent's perspective. Breathing, giving yourself space for reflection, and kind of zoning out from all the action that's going on.
When we started on our first year on the team, one of the moms would, if we weren't staying at a hotel, she would outfit the back of her car like for rest and relaxation. And so she would pull her daughter out of that space. Like you were saying, it can get kind of crazy. And the
So
mom,
stressful. Yeah.
you just need a space to not be a part of it and pull away for a minute. Like Amira was saying, we need that moment to breathe and to zone out.
That's a great point.
In between the dances, if you have a break and you don't have a hotel, like she made it nice. Like there was pillows and blankets and snacks, and I was like, I want to go to the back of your car.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I go to your trunk? Is it
That's fantastic. I love that because I've seen so many meltdowns happening between parent and child in those really stressful moments. And as a director, I would always try to calmly diffuse, but also talk to the child of, sweetheart, you can't talk to your mom like that. We need to just calm down, and be the advocate. But then also if the parent was out of control, okay, we need you to step away for a minute, because I've seen it happen both ways, and it's so understandable. But you want to make sure the kids are always respecting their parents, and that the parents are not, ultimately riling these kids up right before they're going to go do the thing that, you almost like a pick your battles, like don't argue about this now, talk about it later, but she's about to go on stage or he's about to go on stage. And that's why we're here. Right. So it's always interesting to hear people's perspectives about that.
My parents have started to do, they call it the kid swap. So they will, when it gets too much with their own kid, they swap the kid with another dance mom. They swap kids. Because your kids always listen to and act better with other
the director or another parent.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So they have like a designated kid swapper. And so when they're like, Haley, go to Miss, and they swap kids, and that's how they diffuse the situation. So that's one thing that they've done.
I love that.
Well,
I'm gonna send Casey with my daughter.
It's like a little community, you really build up like being a family, like we're gonna go battle this out. It's it's going to war, like we're gonna go battle this out for the next 36 hours together, and they're your people. So I love that.
Armed with safety pins and hairpins.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be honest, you directors and choreographers, you have enough on your plate rather than to try and like parent
mediate
just too much. So it makes sense. I like the parent walk. I like that.
Yeah.
So how much of this responsibility falls on you as the parent to say, do this, you need to do this, it's your responsibility? And then when do we put it in the hands of our children? Because you both have children of varying ages, and we work with children of varying ages. Like when is it appropriate to say, okay, if you don't take your zone out time, I'm not gonna follow you around the venue going, did you zone out? 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 Like how much of that responsibility should be on the kid and how much should be on the parent?
When do we stop being the helicopter parent?
Right.
I think it's gradual, just like with anything. The responsibility lies fully with the parent when the child is young because they don't
Mhm.
know any better. They
Mhm.
have no.
They have to be taught. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's our responsibility to teach them, not only to tell them what to do, but also to model it ourselves. We
Mhm.
are that number one lesson. How am I handling my life when I'm feeling stressed? What am I doing? Am I having a zone out time? Am I taking a breath, or am I freaking out and having a meltdown? And the
Mhm.
kids are learning more from what they see than what we say, or that's the first place they're learning it. So after that, we're teaching them. I have a very clear memory when my oldest son was 7, we were on vacation, and all of a sudden I realized he was in 7th grade, and I started seeing how many more years I had left with him in my home. I'm like, I am guaranteed that you're going to be here. I have this many more years to train you to have these
Yep.
moments with you, and then you're going to move out, and I need to know that you can do your laundry and you could make at least a meal or two. Like, there's basic things that I need to prepare you for being an adult. And I started looking at it like a countdown. And I think it's the same way with this. It's gradual. It's not like all of a sudden one day you do everything on your own. We're slowly preparing the kids and we're telling them. And as they get older, they understand and they have more self-awareness. They
Mhm.
feel it in themselves. If they didn't go to bed at a good time, they know the next day they don't feel good. And
Mhm.
instead of us going like, I told you so, you should have gone to bed early. It's like, hey, I'm sorry you don't feel well. Next time we're going to really try and prioritize getting all of our things done so that you can feel better the next day with better sleep. And
Mhm.
they see that growing up, they feel it in themselves. And so I think it's gradual, but it is a learned experience. You're going to have some fails, to teach those lessons, because those are the lessons that stick when we've not done it properly. And it helps us to know for next time how we want to fix it and change it. But
Right.
yeah, gradually, you don't want to have like a 17-year-old that you're telling how to
Yeah.
do things.
Well, let's
Well,
talk about.
well,
Some things. We're all still learning. But
yes, yes, we absolutely are. If you are just now joining us, this is Beyond the Steps, and we are having an amazing conversation with Amira and Casey from Two Dance Moms podcast, and we are talking about what are the self care practices that we can do at home with our performance athletes to help them get through peak training season. There is still a little bit of show left, so please stick with us if you're just now joining us. If you want to watch the show from the beginning, you can go to YouTube at TP Dance Creations or at Apollo Performance and catch the whole thing. From there, make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment, let us know what you think. If you have some techniques that are as wonderful as the ones that they have suggested, please drop them in the comments, because those who are watching, I'm sure, would absolutely love to have any advice that they can to make it through competition season with their students. So sometimes it can be, we kind of already answered this one, but I do want to talk about like taking this seriously. And then as a community taking this seriously. I'm going off on a tangent, but taking this seriously. So I don't know that there is a lot of accessibility to information in the dance community, specifically in the competitive dance community, around self care and practices and resources and tips and tricks and things like that, like we've been talking about. Do you think that making information like this accessible, and this is a strictly opinion as dance moms from a dance mom perspective, is it the responsibility of the studio owner? Is it the responsibility of the competitions to start offering resources like this while they have us there captive for 5 million hours from Thursday night to Sunday night? Is it there? Do you think that it should fall in their realm? Should it fall in that of the studio owner who has a competitive company to provide parents with resources like this? Or is it strictly on the parent to find it?
I mean, we have a podcast focused on dance parents specifically, and I do feel the onus falls on parents because I think the needs for children and for young athletes, it's so individual. Like only a parent can cater those needs to your own child. And I feel like the studios, the choreographers, the directors, they have so much responsibility and other areas that they need to have their focus on that I really strongly feel that it needs to come through the parents.
Mhm.
And that it's probably just an individual opinion. Do you agree, Casey?
I fully agree. I think the buck stops with the parent. I think it's the parent's responsibility. I think if the studio and the director and the competitions all have the bandwidth to create those resources, I think it behooves them to have them available. Everyone will function and flourish better if they're made available and it's taught. But I think the responsibility lies with the parents.
Right.
I feel strongly about this. I completely agree and understand where you guys are coming from. However, I do think that in order for this, I look at this like a machine, right? And there's everybody's got a role, and if everybody's functioning and if everybody is playing their role to the max, the machine functions very well. And if only one part of the machine is functioning very well, the rest of the machine suffers. And I think the parents are the absolute most important component in this conversation. But I think the reality is if you have conventions and studios that are operating same old, and they're not taking mental and physical health practices into concern as they're starting their warm up, as they're starting the day of classes, as they're going through, yes, they can't tailor that to the individual child because every child's different and nobody knows their child like the parent or guardian, right? But at the same time, if they're not laying that foundation, that groundwork at the studio level, at the convention level, but their expectations are through the roof, I think there's going to be a mismatch there. And I think that as an industry, we have to start collectively caring about these things if we want to take care of our athletes and we want to see our athletes dancing well into adulthood if they want to. And we need to start taking care of them. And I think the problem with the dance industry and other industries that we're seeing right now at this point is that we're not all saying the same things, and we're all operating, some of us are operating based on information that we had 50 years ago or from what our mentor taught us when we were 7, and we're just repeating that now to our students, or we are just haven't taken a class ourselves or realized that there's new techniques and new science and new studies that show that self-care is really, really important to a successful student athlete. I think we're just not all talking about the same things. And that's the problem with dance across the board, is that since there is no governing body, like cheer has USASF and, marching arts has DCI, dance really doesn't have that thing. And so there's nobody that's like sending all of the standard information down the pipeline. And that's really tough to put on the shoulders of parents and who are just trying their best, but they may not know everything dance requires, but studio directors and conventions do. And
Right.
so I think, or should, if they're legit, right? And so
Right.
I really do think I look at it like this big wheel, and everybody has to have their hand on that wheel, right?
Right.
I think it's interesting. The parents, us parents, we are the epitome of like ownness and
Right.
responsibility.
But I
Because
love that.
parents are
That's
saying,
great.
parents, we need to own this. You being having been a director, you having been a director and studio owner are saying, no, we need to own it. So I think the good news is we are all individually saying we all need to own this. And I think that that's where the answer lies. Ultimately, the biggest responsibility is the parents of the child, but there still needs to be awareness and education from studios, conventions, and directors and stuff like that.
Like you said, we all need to work together, and there are elements in conventions, sometimes even in the times in which the conventions are and how long they last, and different things that kind of do work against some of these things. And having everybody working together, I mean, there's no better option than everybody putting in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I really think that, we're there's some really great steps being taken. I think, we're headed in a really good direction with it all. There's at least, I mean, we're having conversations like this that would have never happened, 10 years ago even. So it is fantastic that we're even talking about it and that it's a thing. Absolutely, like there's no parents are going to be able to tackle it thoroughly and apply it to their specific child. I wish every parent had that ownness, but I know that's not always the case. But and there's no way a director or a teacher is going to be able to apply it that specifically to every student, because like you guys said, the bandwidth just isn't there. But at least putting relevance on the practices, I think, is where they come in, and that's important.
Yeah, and they have to have the tools to do it. Like you can't put things in a toolbox if you don't actually have the tools or know where to go and get them. So,
Yeah.
To hear you say that you think is a parent responsibility is like
Wonderful.
what? Oh my gosh! Like, are you? I mean, because everybody always does pile on the studio, pile on the competition directors, pile, pile, pile. But like Bree said, we have to give parents the tools. Like you can't say, "Hey, go put that screw in the wall," and not give them a drill or a screwdriver. Like you have to be able to give it to them, and that's what we hope shows like this and podcasts like yours are the tools that we can then raise the awareness and put them in parents' hands to be able to use it. So
I think a lot of what we are taking on as far as like trying to learn these things is based on, unfortunately for our older children, our dancers are our babies. And so the first and second born,
Oh my
they've been the
gosh.
ones that we've learned from with their other sports that have been competitive.
Totally.
And so we're able to take from that and see it and learn it, and now be able to be like, oh, we need to help our daughters in this situation with their self-care and stuff, where it's like, man, I just don't know that I knew that or heard that before when I had my sons playing basketball.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, opposite direction. Like I'm taking everything that I learned from dance and trying to apply it to soccer, and it's the same. It's like, wow. And I need to listen to my own advice. I'm the first one to say, like, my problem is I am everything I told every dance mom not to be, but for soccer, I have a huge issue. Like I am a wreck. You know what I mean? I'm totally do not listen to my own advice when it comes to my son and his soccer. But I try, and like I like talk to myself every night. Like I could have done better at this. I should have done this instead. I know better. It just like a demon. It just comes out. Me. So yeah, it does cross over. Absolutely. The schedule of these young people can be absolutely intense and grueling, and insert any sport or athletic. As an adult, how do you make the judgment call on if it's time for self-care or if there's a need for a full stop or extended rest? Like I know for me, that full stop has never been reached because like so we've gotten close, like maybe you're just staying home or you're not going to go to this game, right? But like then my son inevitably has a meltdown, or no, I can't miss it, and we don't want him to miss it. Well, how do you make that call, and have you had to make that call?
I feel like it's so crazy. The breaks that used to be breaks for these competitive sports, they're just getting squeezed. They're getting squeezed out more and more so. And I feel like, if there happens to be a break in schedules that are already crazy, we as parents don't want our kids to miss out. Like that may be their only opportunity to gain a skill or get stronger in something, or meet with this wonderful choreographer or this trainer. And so I myself, guilty as charged. I don't want my kid to miss out. I want them to have all these opportunities, but there's just this squeezing of the schedules that's getting crazy. And what I encourage, or what I think, and what I try to do is schedule in the breaks, the rest, just as much as I schedule in the intensives or the training sessions or things like that. Like you would have, and anything else, put it on the calendar so that you don't ever have to get to the point where you're saying, we have to do a hard stop. We have to do an extended rest. Like it should be small rests they're refilling their tanks so that you never get to that hard stop. And unfortunately, I think when you get to the hard stop, it's like super evident. I think it's really hard for kids to sometimes understand that. They think they're invincible. They think they're never going to need to stop. They've got so much energy. I remember feeling that way growing up, but I think we have to lead them to like examples. And I love Simone Biles' story, Tokyo Olympics 2021. She's maybe not a dancer, but I know my dancer loves her, really looked up to her
Yeah,
story.
she's
I think it
incredible
was so
woman.
true. She's just the most incredible athlete. And she had to have a hard stop. She couldn't compete. She got to Tokyo and couldn't compete. And I think it was because she didn't take the time to focus on her mental well being. She didn't give herself rest physically, mentally, and she had to stop. And so I think the goal is to not have to do a hard stop, and you schedule it just like an intensive. And I do. I'm not perfect at it, but I schedule
Yeah.
breaks for
It's true.
my
It's true
kids.
because
Yeah.
otherwise there's always something that you can fill it with.
Always.
Always. Like
Always. Yeah.
it's funny, again, you have to know your kids. Like I look around sometimes at children that are my kids' age, and they've got, 4 activities that they're in, and they're going from here to there and wherever. And I know my kids are not those kids. They value that time at home. They value their time to just veg out for a second and decompress. And so we don't have them in as many things. And I think know their limits. And I don't know how much longer we're going to get away with that either, because as we transition to middle school and high school, and my kids are still in elementary school, about to go into middle school, one of them, and I know it changes drastically as they get older. And so we're trying as long as we can to, feed who our children are and cater to what they need and what they're telling us, which is like, I just want to be home right now, and maybe that won't last forever, but I think you have to go with, like, talk to your kid and know your kid too.
Yeah.
We've had different seasons through our family, and
I would
now
imagine.
two of our kids are like on their way out. But we would always try and hold one day a week if we could as a rest day. And that was typically Sunday. And it was like always try on having better, bigger family meals and games and things that were just different. That way we could kind of fill back up and get that sense of togetherness and rest. And even still, we don't always practice that Sunday rest day, but my daughter still does it for herself. Like her friends will, and she loves people. She's an extrovert, but even still on Sunday, she's like, I don't want to do anything on Sunday. It's my reset day. And no, so
I love that.
She's like, I wash my sheets. I get everything ready for the week. I just want to like kind of be alone, not in a,
Withdrawal type of way, but
Yeah.
just in a rest type of way.
Just in a restful way. She loves to have her Sunday to kind of set up her week, and then she feels ready to go.
That's fantastic. I love that. This has been a fantastic episode. And if you missed it, you need to go back and watch it from the beginning. You also need to like, share, and subscribe so you can get more Beyond the Steps content. So check us out at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. We've been talking to Cayse Day and Amira Azimi today from Two Dance Moms Podcasts Unite. What are the self-care practices to do at home with our performance athletes to get them through their peak training season. Again, can't stress to you how great this conversation has been. So go back and watch it from the beginning. And Melissa, we have homework now. So
yes, we have homework.
Cayse and Amira are new, so you got to fill them in on the homework situation.
Yes, so we give homework here at Beyond the Steps, ladies. And each week we ask our viewers to do one simple thing between now and the next show that they can do, very simple, to make progress in this area. So we're going to ask you to give our viewers this piece of homework this week. So what would you like for them to do?
Say, number one, I would say your homework would be breath. You can set it on your watch. There's a little breath app. Just remember to take those moments. It's so easy. It's only a minute, and you can set however many you want. But taking that moment to just breathe and come to a calm place, I think physically, mentally, emotionally, it's going to be restorative for you, for your kid, for everyone, really.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's easy. We can do that.
Breath app. It's right here. Absolutely. So you have your homework. You can use your app. You can use a bunch of different apps if you don't have an Apple Watch. But we also have our weekly homework that we give you every week, and it's to take the steps initiative. It's the impetus for this show, developed during COVID, as we were talking about COVID a little bit earlier. It's a 5-part series that is totally free that will provide you with free information, modules, and education from professionals in areas like nutrition, psychology, sex abuse and prevention, racism, gender equity, and of course, dance, medicine, and science. It can be taken online, and Bree is going to pop that on the screen for you to be able to take that as well. Our guest, you have a podcast. Like Bree said, podcasts unite. I love podcasts. We love doing podcasts. We both make podcasts, and people out there love podcasts because guess what? They're watching. So the Two Dance Moms podcast, the link is there. It can be found on Apple. Can it be found anywhere else, ladies?
Everywhere. Just about everywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify,
everywhere you get your
Google, wherever you get them, we're available. Thank you guys.
Awesome.
Go listen, follow, subscribe. Yeah, listen, get registered to get all their episodes, all the things.
How often do you release content?
Every week, generally on Tuesdays. Sometimes we add a little bonus episode on Fridays, and we just like to share all things dance parent and competitive dance involved.
We run
mad respect because we film the show 10 months out of the year, and it is a beast to do every week. And so mad respect to you guys for that.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a labor of love.
It is. That's the best way to describe it. Absolutely. How can people get in touch with you guys?
You can subscribe to the podcast at Two Dance Moms Podcast. You can also email us. We love receiving emails. We correspond a lot with our emails at twodancemoms@gmail.com. And we are also on Instagram at Two Dance Moms Podcast. So please follow. We share a lot of stuff there involving the podcast.
Great. Wonderful.
Awesome. You guys have been absolutely a blessing to have today. We're so excited to connect with you. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having us, you guys. It's really been fun.
Everybody go back and listen. We're going to be back next week with another fabulous episode for you. Lots to talk about. Make sure you go and follow us. All of our recordings, this episode and everything else for 4 seasons can be found on YouTube at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations, as well as Facebook and Instagram. Make sure you give us a follow, like, share, subscribe, all the things. And if you have a topic you want to hear us talk about, or a guest you feel like you would make a great guest for the show, we still have a few episodes left to schedule before we start working on season 5, which is crazy. So email us at info@apolloperformance.com. We want to hear from you. We certainly appreciate all of your support. You have your homework from Amira, Cayse, the Two Dance Moms. You have your homework. Get that breath app. And until next week, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have a wonderful weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
It's trying.
It's not ending. Hold on.
All right.
They don't want us to leave. It's okay. We can just keep dancing.
Nobody wants to see us do the dance.